Are you wondering about your child's speech sound clarity at the age of 3 years old? Especially because around this time is when your child is preparing to enter preschool. And in preschool, it's really important that a child is understood by their classmates and by their teachers. Hi, my name is Amini. I'm a speech and language pathologist with several years of experience working in clinics and schools with children and their parents to maximize speech and language development. And my mission with this channel is to empower parents and caregivers of children under the age of 5 with simple speech and language tips and tidbits that will help them to help their child. Because under the age of 5 is when a child's brain is developing so rapidly, and speech and language skills are really the foundation for all kinds of learning in the future. So without further ado, let's get into it. When I am looking at a 3-year-old speech development, of course, any Google search will get you a bunch of milestones, which can be a little bit confusing. But I'm going to focus on just the top 3 that I, as a speech therapist, would look for. So the first one to watch for is something called intelligibility. So intelligibility is how clear a child is, or how easily understood they are. And when we're usually talking about intelligibility, we're talking about intelligibilities with unfamiliar listeners. Mom and dad tend to understand most of what a child says, but somebody like a teacher or a child at the playground or maybe aunt who's visiting might not. So it's a good idea whenever you have new communication partners to see what it is that they understand out of what a child is saying. So usually with 75% is what I'm looking for at the age of 3. 75% intelligibility means that out of every 4 things that your 3-year-old or preschooler says, at least 3 of them should be relatively clear. That means that only 1 of them should be so off that they're not quite clear. But at the same time, there is some wiggle room there. So it's okay for your child to be missing some sounds. It's okay for them to be dropping some sounds, mushing words together. Some of that can be okay because a child's speech sound inventory is still developing. So that's why we have that 75% as a benchmark. Another thing that I want to point out is around 3 years old, normally a child is beginning to put their words together into phrases and sentences of at least 3-word length. So that's putting 3 words together. So for example, I drink milk would be a 3-word utterance. And what tends to happen is the more words that a child has in a sentence, the more potential there is for the words to not be so clear. So I drink milk could become something like I drink milk, or I drink milk, or everything is kind of bunched together. There is definitely a possibility that some consonants are dropped, and that's why we want to keep an eye on our intelligibility. So out of every 3 things that your child says, can you at least make out the words in 2 of them? Or out of at least 4 things that your child says, can you at least make out the words and the spacing in 3 of them? That's something to keep an eye out for, and definitely consult with other people because, like I said, mom and dad tend to understand almost everything. The second tip that I look for in a 3-year-old is they should be acquiring their k and g sounds. In previous videos in this series, I talked about how at the age of 1, a child is getting their PBM sounds. At the age of 2, a child is getting their T, D, and N sounds. So definitely those should be in there now. So PBM and TDN are definitely supposed to be in there at the age of 3. The new players are K and G. So some words that you can watch for that probably happen a lot in daily routines are cookie, girl, sticky, bap, bag, maybe bugs. If you noticed in the words that I suggested, not all of them had k and g at the beginning of the word. Some of them had them in the middle, and some of them had them at the end. So definitely different versions of K and G should be happening when your child is turning 3. Of course, if they've just turned 3 or they're in those first months of 3, you can give them some time, but around the age of 3.5, definitely a child should be saying their k and their g sounds. One thing to look out for, sometimes kids will substitute T or D for K and G. So cookie, for example, will become something like tutti, or dog with that G at the end will become dod. This is a phonological process. It's known as fronting. So basically a back sound like k and j came to the front, t and d. So again, when you see things like cookie becoming tutti, that's a phonological process. That's a speech sound error. That can be normal all the way up to maybe 3.5. If you continue to see that as an error and you're not seeing the K and G at all, that is something to mention to a speech and language pathologist near you, maybe to get an evaluation or to mention to the speech therapist, because chances are that will definitely impact the intelligibility or the clarity of your preschooler speech. So keep an eye when you're looking for the K and G for that fronting and make sure that it's phasing out as a child progresses through their 3rd year. The last speech milestone that I would look for in a 3-year-old is something called a CVC word. Fancy way of saying a consonant, then a vowel, and then a consonant. So words like cat, k, and t are at the end. Bat, mat, cup. All of those are CVC words. And the main feature that I focus on with these CVC words is the consonant sound at the end of the word. So usually at the age of 2, it is okay for a child to be dropping that end consonant. That's pretty normal. A lot of kids do it. But at the age of 3, they should start picking up on that last consonant and they should be emphasizing it. So cat shouldn't be ka, bat shouldn't be ba, and cup shouldn't be ka. You should really hear that 3rd letter. What's dangerous about this is if you're not hearing the 3rd letter when a word is just said by itself, when the words are said together, you most definitely will not hear it. So for example, if you want to say the cup is white, right? That'll become the ka e white, which is very difficult to understand without any context. So if you continually have that final consonant dropping, your intelligibility or speech clarity is going to go very low at a time when your child is just being introduced to school, is just being introduced to peers, etc. So if you see a consistent dropping of that end sound, it is very important that you mention this to your pediatrician, maybe call a local speech therapist or a speech pathologist so that you can find some strategies to nip this in the bud. If final consonant deletion continues to happen as a child gets closer to 4 years old, it definitely will probably take some time to correct. So the earlier that you try to correct, like with anything, the better it is. And final consonant deletion is definitely something to keep an eye out for. So those are our 3 speech milestones to look out for. First one, 75% intelligibility. Remember, 3 out of the 4 things your child says in phrases should be understood by somebody who doesn't know them that well. K and G, they should be coming in and not be swapped with T and D. And CVC words, make sure that a child is saying the last sound in whatever it is that they're saying and they're not dropping it. So now that you know all of those things, definitely keep an eye out for them. And remember, the earlier that you reach out for help, the better. If you're looking for some more resources to help you as you help your child's speech sounds, check out the description box below. You'll find our mailing list with a free monthly tip on speech and language development. There's also our ebook for preschool language development. And there's also our parent education courses for children the age of 0 and 4. There's a speech sound specific course that you can check out. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. It'll help you to find more content that might be relevant for you and your child. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching and happy talking.